Hello, and welcome to Ask an Archaeologist. I'm Paul Duncan McGarity.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask an Archaeologist with me, Paul Duncan McGarity. Now this introduction will be very short indeed because I had an extensive conversation with archaeologist Steve White. The reason why he is particularly important to this podcast will become very clear when you listen to the interview, and there's really not much else I can add to it other than we got into a lot of detail about one particular site. So it's a slightly different style. We do still talk about his career and how he got into archaeology, but there's a lot more emphasis on one particular discovery. And if this is something that you'd like to hear more of in the future, let me know about it. I'm looking to do more things with Ask an Archaeologist. These are really early stages of the plans, but the idea is that there might be some videos appearing, or maybe different kinds of podcast content. So yeah, genuinely, if you've got anything that you would particularly like to see, or you'd like me to do a podcast or more of a deep dive into, drop me a line. I like to hear from you. As you can hear in this episode, there was a little bit of fortune in the fact that one of the questions I was asked on Twitter was specifically about the site that I was going to talk to Steve about anyway, so it works out quite well. But yeah, if you want to drop me a line, you can do so on @AskAnArch on Twitter. Yeah, that's always the best way of getting in contact with me. Usual begging section. Coffee, link, blah, blah, blah. One thing that would be really cool if you could do is, we've not had many ratings on iTunes for a wee while, and it actually does help bump things up if you could, if you do enjoy it, write a review, pop a star rating on or whatever, and most importantly of all, if you enjoy it, tell other people about it. If I'm going to start doing more odds and sods, I'd like more people to hear it. And if you enjoy it, I hope you will want more people to hear it too. It's quite an interest. Yeah. It's an interesting day today. I'm doing this section 2 days after I've done the interview. And the interview one follows a week of putting the kid into the settling week of nursery. So we've had like hours and hours away and sort of quiet time to relax, whereas this small introduction is done after a very broken night's sleep, and I'm sure you will be able to tell the difference in the energy levels. But that means it's the right way around. You're getting an hour and a half of me being all jazzy rather than 5 minutes of me being on and an hour and a half of a slog. So I'll leave you to it. Here is Steve White. Catch you next time. Bye.
Life of a field archaeologist in lockdown must be quite a peculiar thing.
Yeah, I mean, so there's more paperwork to sign.
Right.
Apparently they've got in most places, like, I mean, not us, obviously, but when you're going into a third party, you're going into like another site or something and just doing a monitoring exercise. They are obviously all very 100% COVID secure, and I couldn't possibly say anything otherwise.
No, nor would I ask you to. Yes, I know that. I know it. Well, it's two people digging a hole. Like, the hole's only going to be a certain size.
Yeah, there was a great. It's one of the sites because Jess, being part of Prospects and stuff, has been on like the sort of the MOLA Health and Safety Committee before stuff like that. And there was one that came up the other week where she was being like, so let me get this right. The excavation area is 6 meters by 6 meters. How are you getting in? How are you getting the spoil? What's this? What's that? And it's like, yeah. This is perhaps not the best thought out of things.
Yeah. You can have 3 people in that hole as long as they maintain their state in their strip. Yeah, just looking at each other. There's like this column of unexcavated archaeology right in the middle. Why are all of your trenches like
amazing sections
donuts? Yeah. Are you leaving the bit in the middle so you can see the stratigraphy? No, we just don't go near it.
It's the dangerous bit. It's always the dangerous bit in the middle.
If I go near that, I'm too close to the person over there. We're going to have to get longer handled mattocks, and then got a whole issue of throwing your back out by swinging the head too far.
Yeah.
So you work for Archaeology Southeast?
Yes.
Yes. What is your role with them?
I am an archaeologist, which basically means supervisor for them. So I run small jobs, medium jobs, or in some cases, large multi-phase jobs in East London for 18 months.
Yeah, jobs, if you will.
Jobs,
I think, so we're going to talk a little bit about how you got into that, what you've been doing, and we're also going to take, this is going to be slightly different for what we do on the podcast, because normally the focus is on someone's entire career, but we've actually had a request come in shortly after. It was a strange turn of events. For the first time ever, I've been contacted by someone, a guest going, "Do you want to talk about a thing that I did?" which was lovely to have. But also, at pretty much like a day afterwards, I got a message from a chap called Travis, and I'm going to murder the second name, Michael, Travis Michael, who asked the question: what happens when a site is found in a city? For example, this, and then put a link to the site that you have just finished excavating. And the one that we're going to be talking about today. So I was like, well,
that's brilliant.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sometimes pulling this together is easy. So we're going to talk a little bit about your career and how you got to where you are. But we are going to talk about one specific site, and that site is the excavations of the Red Lion.
Yes.
Which you seem quite happy about. Yeah.
Why not? It's been an interesting month or so. It really has. It's been odd. It's a good site to run. Great team. And the post-ex has been very interesting as well. So I mean, it's that kind of like, I always think with these things, there's always like once in a career kind of site you might get. It might be something like Bucklesbury. It might be, Convoy's Wharf. It might be whatever it might be, and you get this chance to work on a long form project, and you get to see it from like start to all the way to the end. Yeah. And they don't happen that often for big sites, but when they do, it's an opportunity to be seized and grabbed. And like what we try to do with this as well is because a lot of the people who started working on this site hadn't done much urban work before. So we got to teach a whole generation of archaeologists almost how to do single context recording. Stratigraphy.
What we'll do then, what I think might be the best way of approaching this is we'll talk about you, we'll talk about your background, and then we'll go through chronologically how the site came together. And when we get to the actual site itself, you can explain to people what the difference is between, why people not excavating in an urban context is a different way of approaching archaeology to rural sites. What is single context recording? And before we get into any of that, it would be very remiss of me not right at the top to also say that listeners to the podcast will also have heard you regularly before, but I don't think they will have been aware of this because you are the wailing guitar that they hear
at the start of every podcast.
Because we have amongst us a podcast celebrity, one of the members of From the Ashes. And whatever we talk about from now on, there will be people who are like, "Oh, I don't care anymore. He's the guy who Paul puts the music on too loud at the beginning of."
Oh, that's very cool. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. You're going to be providing your own introduction music for this one. The only guest.
So funny, but I do.
Yeah. I'd love to see another guest come in and be like, actually, I play the piccolo at level grade 9. Like, well, for This month we're having piccolo music then. That would be magnificent. So, how did you get started in archaeology? First of all, where did you go to university, and what made you decide to study in the first place?
So I can't say a terrible lapse in judgment or anything like that.
You can absolutely say a terrible lapse in judgment. We're coming up to the point where people are choosing their universities and their degree courses. And I was like, should I do a special episode where I just warn people? Or
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that I didn't do archaeology as an undergraduate. I actually started in the A's. I started my undergraduate doing accounting and finance and economics.
Oh, wow. That's very different.
And after a year of that, I thought, no. Changed to do history. But that was back, I was studying at Lancaster University at the time.
Okay.
And what you could do then is, because this is back pre-tuition fees. That's how long I'm talking about. And what you did is you got local authority funding for 4 years. So I just picked a 3 year. I did the first year and thought, well, the first year was quite fun, but I didn't really like what I was studying. Let's do that again. And did it instead. And yeah, I mean, I did history as an undergraduate, then did a master's in historical research, however you look at these things, and then tried to work for a year, not successfully. And I actually,
what sort of thing were you looking at doing, or like what jobs were you looking at?
I didn't really know. I was basically, because I had agreed to move down to Surrey to live with a friend of mine who I'd met doing my degree. Hadn't really thought much about, how does one pay for rent? Hideously enough. So spent a certain amount of time bouncing around unemployed or doing temporary jobs in bookstores and things like that. And decided I wasn't really happy doing any of that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, my grandparents passed away, and I came into a small amount of money. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to do something. I want to do something with my life. I don't know what it was. And then I was just like slightly tipsy one evening looking through, and I was like, oh, archaeology. That sounds fun. And so I ended up applying to UCL, Institute of Archaeology, who I now work for, which is very odd. I can't tell you the sort of joy I got to when I worked out, okay, I've had X months of paid slips. That's paid off all of my tuition fees. Brilliant. So I applied to do a master's at UCL. They foolishly said yes. And I did a 2-year master's course. It was in fact, I was there when you were doing your undergraduate, I think, because I remember you at 99s. Very distinct.
When were you in there for doing your master's?
2003 to 2005.
Yes, I was there from 2003 to 2006. So the less said about 99s, the better.
I know. Mondays as it ended up becoming, didn't it? Which is horrendous. I mean, 99s was the way forward, and oh god, pain and the suffering that first year, Jesus. Anyway, God, 99p for a pint, 99p for a shot and a mixer. Can you imagine such a thing? It's terrifying.
Can't even remember such a thing.
That's true, isn't it? It wasn't the best quality of stuff, but. So I ended up studying archaeology. So the qualifying year was like second and third year rolled into one, do it in one hit, and then I did the master's year the following. So 2003 to 4 was the qualifying, 4 to 5 was the actual MA. I did that. I finished that and went, what now? I've probably got a real job, so I got a job in a bank.
Wow, you really bounced between the two. What I actually was going to say, I really enjoy the fact that you started an accounting degree, and then only 4 years later you went, well, how does one pay rent? Not strong.
I never said money or finances is my strong suit.
So you start working in a bank.
It wasn't going well. I worked in commercial banking. For Britannia, and there was lots of sales. And I'm not really a selly kind of person, It's like I don't really have the right mentality for here are targets. I need to sell this many appointments and this much stuff and get these people to buy these bonds, and it's just it just wasn't fun. And then I got to the summer of 2006 and thought, you know what, nah. And a friend of mine, Brenna Hassett, and her partner Andy Bevan at both at UCL, were doing a project on Antikythera in Greece, which was 6 weeks on a Greek island doing field walking. And I was like, well, that sounds much more fun.
What is field walking?
This was track walking. So what you do is you were walking tracks of 100 meters, and you were counting how many sherds of pottery, obsidian, shirt, whatever it might be, picking up interesting ones. And the idea was they walked the entire island to be able to do a spatial distribution of finds across this particular island.
Okay.
And it was very cool, very interesting project. And like this island, right, has got like 20 people who live on it and like 1,500 goats. One of those sort of, and like you had like there was like a little port that everything came in, and there was a taverna. And the taverna was also the shop and things and stuff. And it was, also they had this really amazingly awful local wine called Cressy, I think it was. And they used to pour it out of diesel cans into like, and it was like €5 for like a 2-litre bottle. And no.
Trouble.
But yeah, so I did that. And then I went to work on Lobster's project at, oh god, the one next to where Barkham used to be.
Just for clarity, Lobster is a person and not a station.
I didn't go work for Shellfish. No.
Yeah. You've not switched careers again, and he's like, we've got pots offshore.
Like,
god, another career. No, Lobster is someone that we know.
Rob's the top guy, and he had me down for about a month, and I was living in a tent. I think Tina was living in a tent as well, and we were just doing, I'm using first name things here as opposed to actually describing people's full names. And I was there for like a month helping out on he was doing the trench and then to work out, I think, where he was the excavation areas. And then I went to go work back in a pub for a little bit. And then I got a job working for Archaeological Solutions. Instead of the better. But it was my first job in commercial, and it started me on the path. And that was working out in Essex, in Heybridge in Essex, and staying on like West Mersey and stuff. And it was quite good fun. We were there for like it was supposed to be 6 weeks, ended up being 2 months. That job.
What was the site?
It was an Iron Age settlement, and also had associated cremations. So lots of really nice stuff. Really, it's a pretty good first site, to be honest.
Yeah. And you're going in as a sort of like the excavator.
Yeah.
You're doing the digging, and there's
doing the
people above you.
Yeah, I'm like I think that they called them field assistants then, or field arc, various terminologies.
So, was this one of the first times you were doing sort of excavation and recording, like excavation?
Yeah, I'd done a little bit, but I hadn't done a huge amount. I'd done maybe in total about 2 months before that point of total actual field work. 2 months of excavation with another 6 weeks of the field walking stuff as well. So this is very much like my sort of initial, like, what's a half section?
So what's the difference between the site that was sort of like, what kind of thing did you see as the difference between working on the site near Barkham with Rob and working on a commercial site?
Getting up on time was the big one. No, it's interesting because the recording was a lot more formal. Like it was actually that was a good sort of introduction to like completely like sort of training excavations to here's how we do it in the commercial sector. And it has things like had an overall plan of plans, had a section register, had photo registers, had all these sorts of registers that I hadn't necessarily played with before. So that was quite good fun. It's weird to think back at that, actually, like not being aware of what these things are, because I've been aware of them for so long now that trying to think back to that sort of proto archaeologist Steve is like, how does that even work,
Yeah. Was it a surprise to you that you were only really coming to terms with those sort of things when you get into the job market?
Oh yeah. Yeah, but then I shouldn't be surprised, because there's it's interesting. I mean, there's lots of distant discussions now about how how much they train people to go and do commercial archaeology, and how much is it giving them the tools to learn how to be trained. It's like, don't know. Would like to have known more when I went in, but I mean, the problem is obviously like research schools are at the behest of whoever is doing the research, and it's a question of, are they going to train you up to a certain standard, or are they going to train you to do a particular job? And which one is the most useful for them in terms of what they're doing? So I mean, you understand it. There's a lot of
Yeah.
I can stand both sides of the discussion. And
well, the thing
go right down the middle of it.
yeah, the thing that I'm sort of leading to then is that you eventually end up. You leave AS. Do you go to ASE next?
Oh, no, I go to Cotswolds Archaeology for 6 months on the Brecon Beacons.
Oh,
in the
goodness.
winter.
Wow, you have earned your stripes, to say the least.
Well, the thing is, though, the first 6 weeks of that was on stand down on full pay with subs and vehicles, and that's where I met my other half as well. So
yeah, oh, very nice. So why were you stand down?
There was, I believe, the technical term was an ecological issue, which is at some point somewhere driven 4x4s over these sensitive ecological areas that they weren't supposed to. So they had to set up some particular, it's like 6 weeks of like delay so they could sort out the RAMs and access.
Yeah. RAMs is
risk assessment method statements. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
So there's so many acronyms and shorthands. It's like sometimes you catch yourself using terminology you don't even realize you're using it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I read a document the other day, and it was sort of like the road will be very close to the DMV, and we need to make sure that the RGS is well protected. I was like, I know what it means, but also, this is we're not going to war. Why? We're not saving time by I can kind of see if a soldier uses all these acronyms that you've saved yourself vital seconds. You can go out and you can take the post. Whereas we're like, we've saved vital seconds, which we're now wasting whilst explaining what they mean.
What I always find is funny is the appropriation of sometimes military jargon in archaeology. So stuff like, we're gonna do a recce, or we're gonna demob. I'm like, guys, come on.
Yeah. We're going to shoot you all in the face. Just classic.
Yeah.
So off to the Cotswolds with you, out to the Brecon Beacons, more learning.
Yeah, more learning. This was like a test pitting and trial pitting exercise followed by a strip and map and sample, which are all, again, terms that involved basically strip area, dig holes.
Right. But it's just a slightly different way of covering an area. Test bitting to see what's small excavations to see what's in the ground. Stripping, taking off larger surface areas and stuff like that. And lovely.
It was, but it was a lovely pit because it was on top of Mudfire, which is like this really scenic part of the world, and we're just digging holes. At that point, we had we had mountain rescue with us because it was the winter on top. And so we had to be escorted up, and you would go and walk up over the hills, and it was like a 40-minute walk from the compound up with tools. Bearing in mind that whilst on the excursion to Greece the previous year, I'd fallen basically off a little cliff and busted up my knee. So trying to climb things in the wet with long time. A lot of fun.
I was going to say, because it's such a physical job, did you ever feel, when you had a knock like that, did you feel that you could stop to recover, or was it did you work through them?
I think part of that is I was young and stupid, and I didn't realise that actually I'm entitled to recover. I would just push myself physically as much as I could do. And anyone listening to this who maybe is just starting out in a career in archaeology, I would say you're completely within your rights. If you're hurt, stop, for the love of God, stop.
Mm-hmm. There's a weird sort of I don't know if macho's the right word, but sort of there's certain elements that I think, because of the way that archaeologists do learn a lot of what they do on the job, this idea that some people have of we work in all weather. We don't stop for anything. It's like, maybe you should.
Well, this is one of the things when I just flashing forward when I got to the site that we're going to be talking about in a bit. One of the things I was very hot on was look, I would go out and do an inspection every morning before most breaks and stuff, just to check to see what the situation is. And I am very proud of the fact that the person who is in the site accident book the most is me. Because doing site walkovers and falling over because it was too slippery there's a great photograph on Facebook of me covered from ankle to freaking neck in mud on my back because I just went doing that, But
yeah,
my whole point was like, look, if I fall over and I'm gingerly, carefully inspecting the site, someone who's carrying tools, doing physical work, is gonna probably go arse over. What's it? So
yeah.
let's be careful, guys. But yeah, so I pushed myself too much when I was younger, and I ended up having to have surgery on my knee in 2008, actually, which is a whole other thing.
But yeah, no, I think it's something worth bearing in mind because, as I say, people are going to be starting out in their careers come now, whatever. Yeah. When people are going to start looking for jobs, it's important to try and break that attitude of I don't know. You must have come across, if you're doing these jobs where you're working away a lot, you must have come across some of the people who are maybe a generation or two above us who. Right. Okay. Yes.
You're very carefully phrasing that question.
Do you know what I mean? Though
I know exactly what you mean.
Do you? Basically, I think we may have come around at a time where archaeology had been a professionalized industry for about probably 10, 12 years by the time we start getting into it.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of people who were involved in, like, what I'm trying to ask is, what was the sort of, with the way that you're learning on site and with the people around you, what was your interaction or your experience of the difference between some of the people who were working on site and your peers and this idea that we are in a professional environment on a building site, which is quite a potentially very dangerous place to work?
I think there's lots of, I think the best way of putting it is friction between all the different ideas and different concepts and different people. There was certainly, I think, people who maybe took it less seriously, and my problem's always been that you have to take this stuff seriously, because ultimately, if you're working in an office and say you have a bad day, it probably just means that you've had a bad day where you've maybe not finished your goal for the day or whatever it might be. If you're on site with lots of heavy machinery around and you have a bad day, that could be a really bad day.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to sort of, cause I was aware that maybe people weren't taking stuff as seriously as possible, and I sometimes get thumb poked at me for trying to stick by things like risk assessments and trying to be careful. But it's just because you've got to be careful when you're working around 20 or 30 ton machines,
Absolutely. And it's one of the last industries on these sites where the people who are doing it are actually carrying out high amounts of physical labour in a day as well, which is quite a different thing to sort of mitigate for, is it?
Yeah, I mean, wear and tear on people is always the problem. I mean, so one of the things I always say to people, honestly, the best thing you can do, get fit, do yoga, do stuff that will help you physically, because the number of people that I know who didn't take it serious. So they I remember a guy when I was working for Mola, older guy, and he was always saying about how archaeology kept him fit, didn't need to do anything else, blah blah. Had a bloody heart attack at the age of 46.
Wow.
So
yeah.
Also, smoking 40 a day doesn't help either.
No, that certainly doesn't. Yeah, I'd say that the lifestyle, yes, there's a lot of physical labour, but there's again, it's an element of it. There is, I think it may be changing more these days, but there was this kind of like, you're not a proper archaeologist unless you go to the pub after the site's finished.
Work hard, play hard, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Yeah, that's out of you because you're obviously now more in a position of authority.
Allegedly.
You're running. I've run a few sites, that kind of thing. Yeah. The people that you see coming through now, what do you think? How do they compare to what you think you were when you started?
I honestly don't think people are that different. I think, from what I've seen, like, because I've had quite a few people who come in like almost straight out of uni or very early stage of their career, like the first 12 months, 24 months, whatever. And like a lot of them, they do the same stuff the rest of us would do. So they would, I mean, they'll be the first ones to say, "Oh, do you want to go to the pub after work?" and things like that. I don't think stuff has necessarily changed. That could be because of the type of personalities and people who are drawn to do archaeology. Is that which one is it? Chicken and the egg? Which is where does the causality lie? You know.
Well, right, I'm dancing around this. So we're going to jump forward a little bit in your career. You've worked at various different organisations. There's a picture of you still on the wall of the office that I am currently not allowed to go into. But
really, that's hilarious.
yeah. Every time I go into the office, the first thing that I see when I go in through the double doors is a massive picture of the Convoy's Wharf.
Really?
And I just stroke your face, hoping that it's like, I hope this works like a voodoo doll, and he knows that I'm stroking him right now.
I'm on the website as well. The Molar website, the jobs advertising website. There's a banner that goes through, and one of the pictures is me talking to Simon Davis and someone else. And it's just me pointing like I'm explaining. Oh, like I'm explaining something to Simon. I mean, come on.
I think I did one tiny bit of work on one job for PCA, which was using a measured sketch to create a CAD drawing of the internal workings of a clock at King's Cross. Oh. And I was inordinately proud of it, and it's now on their website, so I just keep looking in at it every now and again like, I did that.
Yeah. That's cool. That's proper cool stuff, man.
Yeah, it was. Well, cool is a word that means different things to archaeologists, I think.
I know. I'm using it in the full archaeological sense. I mean,
yes, absolutely. So let's jump forward, because what we're dancing around at the moment is you're in an interesting position because you work for Archaeology Southeast, which is the commercial wing of a university.
Yeah.
Of University College London, and as such I think you're in a really interesting position. First of all, what is the interaction between those two organisations like? And secondly, you are placed probably in a position where you can see the kind of people who are coming in to study archaeology, and you're also seeing some early years field archaeology, commercial archaeologists as well. Yeah. So you're in a really interesting position in that sort of route between academia and commercial archaeology.
Yeah, it's really so. I like working for ASE. One of the things that you feel is that from a completely site point of view, if there's a problem, you've got the university behind you to back it up. So you've got this kind of weight that will support you, which is a fantastic thing to have. And when I was at back when it was MOLAS, we had that with the museum, and less so now, I guess.
That's the Museum of London.
Yes, Museum of London. Back when it was Museum of London Archaeology Service, and now obviously it's MOLA, which is MOLAS without the service, as the joke used to go. I'll stop there. I'm only joking. I'm just poking you. I mean, so. We are becoming more increasingly involved with the day-to-day of the institute. So, for example, we have members of our staff that are teaching photography for them at the moment, and we also there's also a placement year program. So, and one of the degrees at the Institute of Archaeology now is a sandwich year, and you spend 1 year in industry with us. So, people are getting and in that year, people spend X amount of time in the field and X amount of time shadowing people in the office, doing everything from fine specialism to geomatics, so you survey, CAD, digitizing, photography, all this sort of stuff. So they're getting a really good 360 view of what's involved with it as a career. And hopefully it's setting them on the path to pursuing it as a career. It's a weird thing because for a long time, I don't think that necessarily that either party, realised how beneficial their relationship could be. And certainly in the last few years, I think everyone's realised how important that relationship is and how much more involved we are with the day-to-day. And there's discussion about how involved they want us to potentially be with field schools or vice versa, or getting people onto our sites where possible. And it's in a very interesting time to be part of ASE because there's a lot of this stuff that's kind of forward thinking. One of the main benefits, though, I think, is thing. We basically got an award for our training last year from CIFA, the Institute of Field Arcs, and that was to do with something called dignity at work, which is about sexism and other stuff like that in the workplace, and how to combat. It's very in keeping with the way the world is at the moment. We've had lots of training about this, and I think that's a key thing: is you actually can have access to this, and that whole concept of how you decolonize archaeology to a certain extent. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting: is we're in a position to help to have that benefit of training and help us move forward as a discipline and as a commercial entity as well. I think it's kind of cool. If that makes any sense, I don't know. That was a bit rambling. I kind of went off on one there, but
no. I think it's interesting to see where the focus of training is, and it's certainly interesting to see that crossover, because it certainly wasn't there when we were at university at that particular Institute of Archaeology.
Yes.
It was never the twain shall meet.
Yeah.
But
I mean, our office is in room 413, so I'm sat next to a seminar room. Well, back when we could go into the office. I've been sat in there since July of last year in the institute, typing away, working away on Whitechapel. And I've seen I had people coming in who are they're having meetings with various people about their dissertations and things like that, and then seeing the influx of the undergrads come in. And I'm looking at them going, well, were we ever that young? I'm sure we weren't. But it's cool. It's being exposed to that gives you a really good appreciation of, I think, how stuff has changed a little bit, and how what people's mentality is coming into archaeology. And I think it's a very interesting place to be.
Excellent. So you've got all of this background behind you. We might as well break down a site.
Oh, I wonder which site. Which site are we going to talk about, Paul?
Which site are we going to talk? Well, of course, we're going to talk about Lambeth Church. No,
at the Archbishop's. Oh, don't even start with that one.
That's for another day when you accidentally found a bunch of archbishops in a crypt.
Oh well, what can you do? You're not looking for them, and you find 6 at once or whatever it was. Who knows?
Yeah. However, no, we're going to talk about the site of 85 Stepney Green, just off Whitechapel Road, on the ancient Roman road to Colchester, otherwise known as the Red Lion.
Yes. Where do you want me to begin? Do you want me to begin at the beginning? Would that be a good
I want to know the first time you hear the words, Steve, we want you to find the Red Lion.
Well, I think we want you to find it might be a stretch.
So when was the first time you were aware of that you were going to be working on the site at Stepney Green?
It was January or February 2015. I was doing an eval with a couple of former colleagues, Rich Crace and Stacey Harris. It's been sent down to do this job in this car park. Standard, just outside the centre of London kind of job. So, you've got this car park. Had to go down there for 6 a.m. to help get the fencing in, because it was an active car park for the consultants for the hospital, for Royal London Hospital. So we had to fence off the places we were going to dig and all that. There's, I shouldn't be.
Why was the evaluation happening there? Because obviously, if it's an active car park for the hospital, are they planning on doing something with it?
Yeah. So the whole thing was actually it's on the south side of Raven Row, north side of Stepney Way, and it's an old safe store at the time, a big storage unit, which they're in the process of want to turn it down because they want to build flats, and also there's some affordable housing tied into it as well from L&Q, I think.
Okay.
So they want to develop the site, but this is pre-planning. So they haven't put the planning. They're sort of they're thinking about putting the planning application in. They want to test everything to make sure blah blah blah, because it's been identified as the potential site for one of these things. Although honestly, at the time, I don't even really thought that we'd find.
No, I think if I'm not mistaken, the prevailing sort of idea, certainly from a document I saw from 2004, was that it was probably had been truncated by the hospital.
Yeah.
Right. So at most you're looking at ancillary buildings, farmhouse, because we'll get into what the site was, but it was a farm, the Red Lion farm, rather than the Red Lion Inn, which was on the other side of the road.
Well, Actually, very fun. The farm becomes the inn, and we've got the material culture to prove it.
That's interesting. So you've changed something else as well, because I understand that there was an 18th century lease that was made for 4 houses and something referred to as the Red Lion Inn, but that was always identified as the other side of the road. You think that this is the south side of the road as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get to that as well. So there's a couple of different things tied into it then. You're unpicking quite a lot of narratives. So...
oh yeah, that's my career in a nutshell. Unpick the narratives.
Yeah. Oh, no, Steve's ruining it again.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Right, so where we are is no one's quite sure what's under the ground. They think it's in the vicinity of the Red Lion, but the prevailing idea is that it has been truncated by the construction of the London hospital. Yeah. So you start your evaluation.
Yeah, and owing to the vagaries of trying to leave space open, because there's active car park. These logistics you have to juggle when you're doing these sorts of small jobs. And I decided arbitrarily with the commission, because it was a sample exercise, not a targeted trench exercise, to move one of the trenches about 5 meters to the west.
Right.
And I pulled the trench north-south, and I came down a whole line of post holes that I would have missed if I hadn't moved the trench 5 meters to the west.
Wow. We're a science, right?
Yeah, science, a little bit of art as well. Yeah, it's all, well, it's the problem with sample exercises, isn't it? Is the sample exercise is based on the idea that everything's equally distributed, but it isn't. For example, I know of a site that was done out in Kent on a medical campus where the eval trenching missed entire Iron Age settlement, but because they found a bit of residual flint, KCC asked for like a little bit extra work, and they found a whole Iron Age settlement and a whole mess of flint scatter, and it's like, well, this is the thing, is that sometimes stuff gets missed.
There's quite the famous example of the Mithraeum as well, which obviously was only found because they were granted access to a random bomb site that cleared an area, and so there's some luck involved, to say the least.
Always.
Particularly on a site where there's no agreement as to where it actually was situated. And I should explain for people why there's a little bit of disagreement about it. The Red Lion was probably one of the first purpose-built playhouses in England, but it only operated it seems to have only operated for a very short period of time. You don't think so?
Not what the evidence indicates, mate.
You think it operated long? So the understanding is that it was 1567 to 68. Yeah? But you think it might be a more...
Oh, I know it's that, man. I've got stratigraphic evidence. I've got material culture. I've got a whole whack of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's interesting to see. So then the question is, if you have the evidence to suggest that it's got a longer operating life, why do we not hear anything about it?
That is a very good question. Now, there's lots of should we come back to this when we actually get into the whole, because this is the whole part of the long discussion.
All right.
Let's
that was so about this.
We're sort of jumping a little bit.
We know what So the Red Lion is a pre-Shakespearean playhouse.
Yeah.
I'm saying all these things, and then I need to check with you. Do you still think it was built in 1567?
Oh yeah, well.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
So the documents are the lawsuits give us 1567 and 1569, so we know it's built by then. Is another question, but it's definitely up by then.
Yeah, we'll get to the lawsuits as well because they're quite interesting.
Oh, they're amazing.
There's a point in that I want to ask you a specific question to see if the archaeology can answer something for me in it. But you've now found this line of post holes. Yeah. What happens next?
Essentially, commission further. So that's 2015, and they commissioned further series of evaluation exercises. There's one in 2016, and then we do some more work in 2017. And again, it's sort of indicating that. Because there wasn't just the line of post holes. There's other bits and bobs and stuff, but the indication there's activity within the date range that we're looking at. So we need to be careful about stuff. And that leads us round to January of 2018.
So it's quite a long process to go from the evaluation to the excavation. What's happening with the planning side of things?
Technically, it was a very short span from the eval to the mitigation, because we pulled the last. So we're in 2018, we turned up to do more trenches. And the idea is they're going to bust out parts of the concrete slab around site. We'll then put trenches in after they've cleared some of the stuff. Blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. We go to pull. I think it's the second trench. Oh look. There's an awful lot of masonry remains right underneath the concrete slab here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Oh dear.
And that then, after a bit of backwards and forwards, resulted in the beginning of the stripping of the first excavation area, which actually wasn't the first one we actually ended up attending to, but we then ended up stripping 7,000 square meters of archaeology over the next 18 months. Some of it some of it was quite highly stratified, so quite a lot of deposits and stuff. That was the beginning of the excavation. And the excavation was an all-consuming entity for 18 months. It was just, we ended up with people from PCA subbed in to make up the numbers, because we needed like 30 or 40 people on site at some time. We didn't have the workforce available in London. And then we recruited more people, ended up being able to keep it mainly ASE team for the last 6 months. And I was very, very lucky, because I had 2 guys who worked as assistant supervisors for me, who were just, I would handle the overall logistics of everything, and they'd be attending to each individual area. And the idea was have one running one area, and then he get a chance to do the checking for that area whilst the next area was running. And it meant that we could actually do a bit of the initial paperwork checking on site.
How normal is it to have different companies working in on sites like that?
I mean, it's not unusual. I've worked on quite a few where, you get subbed in. Normally it's to do with you've got a lot of work on elsewhere and you need to bring more people in, and other companies maybe have a couple of weeks in their schedule where they don't have enough work to keep their staff fully occupied. So they will, there's quite a lot of that in archaeology.
Okay. So you're getting up to this 7,000 square meters. That's in 2018.
Yeah, so it's 2018.
What's happened between 2015 and 2018 for the client?
So we actually started still technically pre-planning, I believe. They're still working getting the planning conditions signed off. Because one of the key things here is that you need to get the planning conditions signed off before you can build, and then you need to get everything, the sale condition discharged as well before you can sell anything. So the client Historic England were like, well, you need to do this if you want to get your planning permissions discharged. So away we went. And I know so we didn't know what we would be, because at the moment when we started, the whole scheme wasn't really necessarily agreed fully. There's still a lot of discussion between Historic England and the client and the consultants and ourselves about what we're doing here. What's the targeted bit? Are we going to dig every single bit of this site, or are we going to target areas? And we ended up doing every single bit of the site. As you probably
what was the decision? Why did they decide to go for? That's quite an undertaking, and I assuming at this point this is the client is paying for that mitigation work to be done.
Yep.
So an argument obviously has to be made for them. They have to see the value in the site, but also in what forces the decision to strip the full site.
The thing is, though, so with that's kind of above my pay grade. That's project manager and other stuff level. All I know is I was told at the end, we're going to strip the whole site. So
I see. Fair enough.
On that. I don't want to speculate when I might be completely wrong.
No, but that's interesting though, because obviously then that means that you must have been having a period where you didn't know how much of the site you were going to get to actually go at.
Yeah.
So you've got these sort of discussions happening, and then all of a sudden, what's your reaction when you find out that you can look at all of it?
Well, my first one was, "That's awesome," followed by, "Oh God, that's so much work."
So you get told that you're going to do the full site. What's your next move then? When they come to you, they say, "Right, here we go. We've got it. This is when we're going to do it." How do you start ramping up for that kind of work?
First question is, how long have I got? Always, how long have I got? And then
how long did you have?
Area. Well, let's just say there wasn't necessarily a deadline.
Okay, so it was.
It was kind of like there was like we had like we'd be giving an area, and it's like, oh, when you got this area, you've got maybe this much time to do it. Do it in this much time, and then that would, as we went from area to area, we kind of get an idea of how long we had in each area as we were in the areas. But as an overall time frame, I mean, honestly, in January 2018, if you had told me I was still going to be there the following July, I would have laughed at you. But
but it's quite an unusual way of doing things. But is that because you were in that pre-planning phase from the client? They didn't have a pressure of building.
I think so, but also I think as well, it's rare that you work on a site where the potential for what you're finding is recognised as being potential global significance, and that's the kicker. I think with something like the Red Lion, because it has, because what it's like on you have that thing, potential significance, don't you? What is the potential? What is the significance of the archaeology? And it's very rare you get to write, when you're doing the final PXA, and the write-up potential international significance. I mean,
well, I was going to say, to show my own cards here, in the last 2 years I've been involved in the excavation of the Curtain, the theatre, and the Boar's Head.
I know.
So, so it's sort of like, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. Why is this of global significance? Shakespeare. Walk away.
It's like, it's proto-Shakesy. Run!
You can say proto-Shakesy, and we can say, he stood on this stage. Peace!
Yeah. Whereas I can go, well, he was probably about 3 years old when this was built. Never mind.
I know. It's quite huge. Quite a big thing. Yeah. So you're starting to excavate the various different areas. How quickly do you become aware of this significance of what you're finding? First of all, what kind of level of preservation are you seeing, and what kind of features are you coming across?
So what's interesting is that what we've kind of done with this site is we've slightly remapped East London morphology, because it turns out a lot of times what you think might be the natural is actually flood deposits that are redeposited natural deposits. So what we found is that we dug down, we found we had masonry remains, we had timber structures, all this sort of stuff surviving. But also found they were truncating through what looks like natural deposits. Remove those, and it's actually not natural deposits, it's redeposited, like basically it's flood deposits, because there's a huge amount of historical flooding in East London. And maybe perhaps it wasn't necessarily understood how prevalent that could be, but the entire site, we had flood deposits across 90% of it.
It got quite marshy there, didn't it? Because obviously the sites at for Crossrail, there was a lot of the Roman wall had the Walbrook coming into it, but that obviously backed up, leading to lots of marshland, lots of flooding from the Walbrook as well. Is that what you were seeing? Those river deposits? Basically,
lots of. I mean, when we talk about alluvium, we talk about that blue clay stuff. But actually, when I talk about alluvial, it's like basically anything that's been moved by water, and you can clearly see the mix of clays, sands, and gravels that was very, it's just basically redeposited natural via a flood process. So technically, geological process, but actually overlying in some cases Roman and prehistoric archaeology. So that's one of the cool things. Actually, we had a mid-age enclosure settlement as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Now here's a question then. This is clearly like a site of major significance for understanding East London.
Yeah.
This, to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, obviously, sounds like because you've had access to such a large area, you've been able to put a lot of things into context quite easily by how they interact with each other and their overlay and stuff like that. Absolutely. There have been a lot of excavations in East London, but it tends to be where it can fit with...
we're very, very lucky because the amount of space, the sheer scope and area that we had. Actually, look on Google Maps, you can see a satellite image of the excavations in process, which is quite cool. And you can see some of the open areas, but you get an idea of the scale of this large open area, and actually gives us access to this sort of modelling that we perhaps wouldn't have if we didn't have that scale of stuff.
Well, does this not then potentially show quite a significant shortfall in the way that commercial archaeology normally works? if such a rewriting of an area comes about.
Let's just say there's a reason now that if you do any evaluations in East London, you're required to strip off the brick earth.
Because of this site. But that's it.
Yeah.
You got, because of this site, you're changing this thing. But if this, if you hadn't moved your trench 5 meters to the west, commercial, the way that commercial archaeology works in urban areas is quite limited. Then is potentially what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, because part of the thing is always is that obviously when you're doing evaluation works, the trick with evaluation is you're supposed to stop at the archaeological horizons. So if you stop where you think you've got natural and you've got cut features in it, and all the cut features are quite late, well, you kind of go, well, that's obviously that must be natural and blah, blah, blah. You never go through it. And I think part of this is what this has raised, that actually it's always worth testing. So it's, because it turns out that sometimes what you think is natural geology ain't actually natural geology. Or
it was just because you had these masonry features quite clearly going through them that gave you the clue.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, how many other sites have we missed stuff on then?
That is a good question. How many times have we missed stuff just because we assumed it was okay and actually maybe it wasn't? I mean, it's no one's fault. It's the nature of the beast, isn't it? Unfortunately, but luckily we're in a situation now where there's, because there seems to be less work going on in the square mile of London. There's a lot more stuff going around the periphery, from zone 2 out, basically. This gives us an opportunity to look at that work and go, well, actually, maybe we can find some more information here. Maybe we can, if we just maybe strip a little bit more off. Once you get to a certain level, just double check, and it kind of. Are
you sure this is information that is getting to other companies?
Well, I mean, it's getting to GLAS, Great London Archaeological Advisory Service, and they're the ones who are like asking people to strip further now. And I know there's quite a bit of grumbling about it, but it is what it is. It's like we've now proven that actually there's more deposits here in certain parts than we previously thought, so we need to be more rigorous with our activity.
Yeah. So the red line's actually only like a small part of what you uncovered then. You've got quite
we've got a whole landscape of stuff. And it's really, really cool. And I mean, for example, we've got a robbed out manor house as well. I mean, it's all this sort of cool stuff. Is
that Ashwees Manor?
Maybe. Yeah.
When you say maybe, but you think it is?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
But what's interesting is the Red Lion farm is built so that there's a large masonry structure that's robbed out, and we've got one corner of it, we've got this large robber cut, right, which is about 3 meters from ground level down, which we dug back, that sort of stuff. But that, you level that up, and that's where the Red Lion farm's built. Right,
so it's quite a bit later. The manor house has had some flooding over it. Was that what you're saying?
Well, it's hard. This is the problem because it was robbed out prior. So we've lost certain relationships by the fact that a later event has removed bits of it. So a lot. This is like working off the strap that we've got and trying to infer our dating and things like that. So it's all very, very cool. But it's that some of this is like we have to be cautious with how far we go with certain statements. There's some stuff I say I think certain things, but I can't necessarily prove them until we get further into the publication process and really start drilling into our strat, which is what I'm looking forward to.
Okay, so you're digging through all of this sort of stuff. There's all these different elements of the landscape, but would it be fair to say that the focus on the potential of the Red Lion being there is the main? Does that become the main element of the excavation? At what point does it become that?
That's always been the main point. I mean, the whole point was always, the whole reason we were there is in case we found it. So ultimately, that was, while all this stuff was there, and all this stuff is really cool. And personally, I think some of it's more interesting than maybe the Red Lion in certain ways. That was always what we were looking for. And honestly, like, we didn't really necessarily know we had it until we got off site and started putting everything together, because bits of it were in different areas. So let's put that stuff together and unpick the matrix and put that strat together, and then look at the dating and go, oh, look at this, there's a large rectangular thing here with a whole line of post holes, and oh crap, there we go. And it's all so
you never saw it as one whole thing. It was never identified at the time.
The only thing that was open, we had what we think is the stage, because that actually matches the dimensions of the lawsuit. 40 foot south by 30 foot east.
40 foot, 30 foot by east west, 5 foot high.
Well, we didn't have the height, obviously, because we're below ground. But
yeah.
No, we had the 40 by 30 quite happily. It was 12.2 north south by, I want to say, just shy of 10 east west. So it basically works out like 40.4 foot by 29.8 or something.
I'm going to ask some very specific questions about what you found of the building, actually, but in a bit. Because, I don't know if you know, I have quite an interest in theatre.
Yeah, I know. I've observed this. Yeah.
So, you said that you think there may have been some bits that were more interesting on site.
Yeah.
How much of this is quite an interesting. I'll try and phrase this properly. I'll try and find the right way to phrase this. You said that you could spend when you excavated the area, then you realised how much time you were able to spend on each bit of it.
Yeah.
Right? How much of an influence was the elements of 16th century archaeology being in an area to give you people saying you can spend more time on this and less time on other areas?
I mean, to be honest,
basically, sorry, let me try and rephrase this in a much better way, right?
Okay.
The story of the site is the Red Lion.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So how much did that impact on decisions that were made about which areas were looked at, the length of time that they were looked at, or the way that archaeology was being carried out? Are you focusing on the Red Lion specifically, or are you trying to give everything equal time?
Try and give everything equal time, but I mean the good thing about because we had quite the site in terms of the sort of the breakdown of formation is northern strips kind of all the masonry stuff where you've got also remains of farmhouses and potential playhouses of post holes and stages and whatnot, and then as you go south through the site you're basically looking at land boundaries and petitions and stuff like that. So you've got post holes and ditches and that, but it's still got layers to remove, so you've got to take some stuff off, come down, whatever. But actually, in terms of, so we say, cubic meterage of archaeology to be dug and recorded, I mean, obviously, the stage took out an inordinate amount of time because, one, it was quite deep as well. I mean, it's like almost 5 foot deep, this thing. Large timbers all around the outside of it. It has to be carefully dug, excavated, recorded, but also preserved because it's timbers. So that takes more time, but that was accounted for. But when we had something which is basically like, you've got, say, 30 post holes in this. So you've got an example of me, I don't know, 30 by 40 meter area. I don't know if that's true. That's just a random idea of how big an area it was. And you've got X number of post holes cutting through it and ditches. You whack them all out 100% because you have to, because you've got stuff to take out underneath it. Record the layer as well, knock the layer off, see what's underneath it and dig all that. And, by the time we got to that sort of stage, we knew how long these things would take. So we'd say, you say, how long is it going to take? Oh, this might take, take 12 days to do this much, this much, this much, this much, and you work accordingly. If you have something that's, but as with everything in archaeology, if you've got something that's a question and you don't quite understand what something is, it takes longer, and you get longer to look at it if you're lucky. And we were lucky.
So you said something quite interesting there, and I think it's worth clarifying for anyone who is listening. That sounds like you had a very different spatial distribution of the kinds of sites. So closer to the road, to Whitechapel Road, is the more intense building. And then as you move away from that, you're getting into what would have been open fields or like enclosures and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like fronting onto Raven Row, which is the northernmost part of the site, that actual road, you can see that road on various historic maps. It's on 1703, but it's referred to as Marling Green, which is very interesting because Marling Green is the one where the Red Lion's supposed to be fronting onto.
Right. So that's where you're getting your maps making sense of the archaeology.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's quite a normal distribution, particularly in arterial roads leading out of London. Lots of building work on the front, and then sort of like moving into the smaller buildings and enclosed areas behind.
Yeah.
Good. So it's following the pattern of what you wanted to see.
Yeah. I mean, it's following the pattern of what you'd expect. Which, I mean, as always, you never dig what you want to dig. You always dig what's there. But when it conforms to certain preconceived ideas that you already have, that's handy. But again, you shouldn't rely on that. Always dig what's there, not what you think is there. If that makes any sense.
It does indeed.
Dig the thing that's in front of you, not what you think it is. I learnt this the hard way by digging my own shadow once as a postdoc. I was like, it started as a real feature. I was like, what's it was.
Yeah.
It's not.
I can join you on that one. Training dig whilst at university.
Yeah.
The two people who were training me told me that there was a grave cut that was on one, like we had the edge of a grave cut on one side of the trench and the edge of a grave cut on the other side of the trench, and what was in the middle was clearly the bit between two grave cuts, right? And they asked me to dig that bit out, and I was like, right, okay, fair enough. And it was 3 swings of my mattock before I went through the skeleton. I was like, oh no, this is the grave cut, isn't it? So, yes, dig what is in front of you and not what you think is in front of you.
Yeah.
Very smart. Let's focus in on the Red Lion then.
Mm-hmm.
What did you find of the structure, and what did you find of the material culture that convinces you, A, you have the Red Lion farm, B, that you have the Red Lion Playhouse, and C, that you have a Red Lion Playhouse that lasts longer than 67 to 68?
You're not going to say it just because I tell you so, is it? That's not going to be an appropriate answer.
Absolutely not.
All right. So what we have in the northeast part of site, you have a series of, in the 16th century, you've got a basement or a cellar, which upon later phases use appears to be a beer cellar. You've got so basically you've got a combination timber and masonry constructed building in the northeast corner of site, 16th century activity. Northwest corner of site, you then start to get a series of post holes, right? And this large timber structure. The large timber structure has, it is inside this north. So imagine a 30-meter east-west by 15-meter roughly north-south large rectangle, right?
Yeah.
Easternmost part of it, you've got this whacking timber structure that has good dating, has the correct dimensions of the thing.
Of a stage.
Yeah. And then you look at the northern wing of the structure, those post holes are mid 16th, late 16th century in date, based on pottery. Again, you've got that. The western side of it, you can imagine 2 lines, one of them quite large post holes, some of them up to 1 meter wide, right?
Yeah.
Again, correct dating for what we're looking at. And then the southernmost part, we've got bits of that southern wing, but a lot of it's truncated by later activity. But we've got essentially a large U shape.
Yeah.
The front of the stage structure, you've got a gap of about 12 meters between that and the westernmost double line of post holes. Now, what we think is the north and south parts are the walls, indicative of the walls, and the western part is the galleries or scaffold. Now, whether that's seated or raised standing area, like you see at the Boar's Head.
So let me get this clear in my mind. We've got an east-west arrangement for the building with a galleried, seated, standing area at the west end, the stage at the east. You don't think you had galleries at the north and south. You think it's sort of like,
well, if they are, there's only a single line of post holes.
Right.
So if they are, they're not overly reinforced. But it actually fits better with chatting with Heather and some other experts in the Before Shakespeare guys. Andy Keane and that lot, who have been very, 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 very helpful. And they've thrown up some examples of European theatres, which meets this whole thing where you've got walls, stage, seating.
Yeah. So it's basically trying to think of a modern equivalent if someone wanted to think of one. If you've ever been to a cinema where it's got a like one of the old ones that has a balcony area, you would essentially assume that the stalls would be unseated, standing where the groundlings are, the yard, and then you've got above them standing or seating in a gallery space. Do you have any evidence for an entranceway as well, or any ingresses as they are?
That's one of the things that I want to get into a little bit more, because I've got some gaps in the post holes, but at the moment, because I've got other truncations as well, I'm not comfortable saying where I think entrance and egress is. But again, this is part of the further work we're going to do. Is what now we've got our ideas, we can start really begin to drill into it, which is what we'll do as we go through the publication process later this year.
Then I have another question about the stage itself as well. Then, now you found quite a lot of timber work there, like planks creating the side paneling. Was that correct? I saw some pictures of that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a theme on Sketchfab saying.
Yeah, so worth a look very much. It was on Sketchfab, yes.
Yeah. I'll send you the link, because it's I think we're about 40,000 views on it at the moment. It's quite cool.
I think that'd be very cool. In the reason we know the dimensions and various things is that there were these two lawsuits. The man who was involved in the construction was John Brain. Brian, I can't remember.
He's a very interesting character. Come back to him.
Yeah, well, he's actually involved in the construction of the theatre with Burbage.
Burbage is his brother-in-law.
Yeah, his brother-in-law. Yeah. But he sues both of the carpenters involved in the work. William Sylvester, who did the gallery, and John William. No, sorry. Sylvester does the galleries, and John Reynolds does the stage. Is that right? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Yes. So in the lawsuit regarding the stage, it's really interesting. There's two things I'd like to ask you about it. One, it says that there was evidence, he said that there was room for a trapdoor. All right. So my question to you is, did you find any evidence for the trapdoor or for any routes in under the stage, so that you could access those areas? And then we're going to get to... Yeah, go on then.
Long and the short,
Yes.
The whole thing, I think that the whole state, so below our existing formation level, it was about 5 foot deep. So you've got quite a large, potentially understage area, which we haven't really drilled into yet. And as I speak to you now, I've just realised that there's potentially a thing along the eastern edge that I've been dismissing as a potential part of the rebuild structure later on, but actually might be the access on the eastern side at the back of the stage. And I hadn't thought of that until now. Thank you, Paul.
It's all right, because if you've got a trapdoor, you need to be able to get under it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that. That's ooh. Oh, well, that's a credit Paul Duncan McGarrity in the publication.
And the other thing I found quite interesting is the reason that the lawsuits took place, or what appears to be, is that John Bryn was accused both carpenters of essentially substandard work. You've now seen the timber work. How good was it?
It wasn't bad. I mean, there was a bit of repair work had to be done to it, but
would you sue someone over it?
I mean, to be fair, it was still there 500 years later, so it can't have been that bad, can it?
Exactly, right? Throw the lawsuit out. There's two other bits of so you described galleries, walls, stage. Two other things that interest me. One is the lawsuits said that there was a tower there as well. A 30-foot high tower with a floor 7 feet above. I think the assumption was that was to try and like swing flags and stuff and let people know that there was a performance happening, or something akin to that nature. And second thing is there any evidence of a tiring house? Any sort of areas where you might store costumes, props, and things like that, or are you thinking that it might be an understage storage?
The tower, no sign of it. Okay. I mean, I think the assumption is we're wondering if it's supposed to be bolted on top of the stage. That's the only thing I can think of, because if you wouldn't have it in front of the stage, because it would be obscuring the view, wouldn't it? So it must have to go on top. So and there's no necessarily any evidence for that, although
you'd think there'd be quite decent foundations or something. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, and there wasn't. But I mean, in terms of storage, again, it comes back to this: how large this understage bit is, and I do wonder if that's your storage bit. potentially.
I think that was something similar with the curtain. I think we saw something similar, that there was a large understage area. So that's very interesting.
One of the things we're looking forward to doing is we're when we move forward, we're going to start doing some reconstructions, and so I'm quite looking forward to getting my teeth into that a little bit, because that will give us some good ideas about how it, not just the formation of it, but also how the evolution of it continues through the 1600s.
1600s.
Oh yeah, mate.
Well, that's the next part of my question then. You've got so it's a new build. It's not reusing elements of the farmhouse.
No, completely separate, completely standalone. Nowhere near. It's about 30 meters back from the farmhouse.
That's very interesting. That's really, really interesting, actually.
Well, because because obviously John Brain isn't the landowner. He's just built this thing on this land. Now, why? We do think that the farm at the point is serving beer, because that's not unusual for farms. And we have evidence of drinking vessels as well. Lots of drinking.
So, do you think the farm's operating as a tippling house for the Playhouse?
Yeah, I think that's I think they have. Again, we've got no evidence for how the relationship is. I think you'd have to assume there's some sort of symbiotic relationship where, like, we built this thing here, maybe have some money, but also you sell beer. Do you want to sell some more beer to our people here? Because that appears to be more as we go through the 1600s.
Yeah,
the farm becomes an inn. We get a lot more material culture that's indicative of actual leisure wear, as opposed to just being domestic drinking vessels. And also we have evidence of animal baiting. So there we go. We've got about 8 skeletons with signs of wounds. Also got lots of horses' legs, which we think is food for the dogs. So it's not
an unusual thing, is it? Because obviously, like in the South Bank, amongst people more people are aware of the globe and maybe the rose and stuff like that. But there's the hope as well, which is a multi-purpose bear baiting or bull baiting.
I think the hope is going to be a good example. I really might dig into that a little bit more, actually. But that's one of my because the multi-purpose thing is a thing I'm very interested in, and that's what I'm wondering. Because one of the things we don't know is the assumption's always been, right, that by 1576, Brain goes off with his brother-in-law and builds the theatre. Yeah. Right? But our evidence indicates that structure's still standing. And in fact, the evidence indicates the only cessation of use of that structure is during the Civil War in 1645.
You're seeing continuous material culture being laid down.
I've got dendro dates in 1670 of reworking rebuilds out of elements of the structure. Right? So, and then we've got a backfill of about 1700.
Right, interesting.
So demolition in about 1700, at which point there's a map, Gascoigne map, and you see this L-shaped building appear. That appears after the demolition of the thing.
Of the thing.
Technical term, thing.
The thing. The Playhouse. I don't know if the audience listening to this would be aware of how significant that is. The evidence of that is because prior to this, the longest operating playhouse is the Curtain, which is 1577. 1578, 1578, depending which way. It's around that time.
Yeah.
Up to the 1620s, and that was considered the longest running longest operating playhouse. You're basically saying that you have found evidence of a 150-ish year occupation with it operating as a playhouse or sort of leisure facility.
I think leisure facility is the best terminology, because I don't want to start claiming it's a playhouse for 150 years because I've got no evidence of that. What I do have is evidence of continuous usage. Now, I tend to think what happens, if I had to guess at this stage, I would say that I think around the early 1600s, maybe even very late 1500s, it's reused, because we've got evidence of the structure around the stage is rebuilt a couple of times, right? The overall structure stays the same, but you've got evidence of like demolition, rebuild. Well, not evidence of demolition, but slightly repurposing, restructuring. And then by the time you get to like the late 1670s, which is the last phase of the rebuild, you've got this really intricate, large structure. Again, and I wonder if what we've got is the farm becomes an inn. The material culture of that is crystal clear, no doubt at all. That's what happens. This big thing becomes a formal inn during the 1600s. It occurs to me that the obvious thing for that is, well, maybe what they do is that the playhouse becomes potentially more of a baiting pit arena. Maybe, it's a very popular thing, and it's horrible, but it's popular. And,
well, this is quite interesting because where the site is quite a long way out from London. I can't remember where Newington Butts is, but I'd say of all the playhouses, the location that you've identified is probably the most far-flung from the city walls. Even the Shoreditch playhouses of the theatre and the Curtain, they're about half the distance, and you would have to pass the Boar's Head, not the George, because that was never turned into a playhouse. Someone just was like, we should build a playhouse, and then nothing happened to it. But you have to walk past the Boar's Head along Whitechapel Road to get to the Red Lion, and it's not close.
Turn around though. You're coming in. It's the first one you come past.
So this is the two things that this is what I'm saying. Or I'm wondering, do you think it's more focused on the trade, the people coming in on the road from Colchester and stopping in the inn, and it's just an entertainment?
Yes.
And what would the impact possibly be of the increase in construction of playhouses on the South Bank, and then ultimately also the indoor playhouses, the Jacobean ones like Blackfriars? Basically, what I'm trying to ask is, where's its clientele coming from?
Well, one of the things that I want to drill into is because we've got lots of trade tokens, lots of stuff that seems to be coming in from Essex and those sorts of areas. That's part. But what I want to do is I need to start looking into those trade links in the post-medieval period and looking at quite specifically where is this culture coming from, and can we from this begin to infer? Well, actually, as you say, the clientele is coming in as opposed to going out. That is a very interesting and part of our research going forward, actually. And I think, as you say, that isolating that gives us then the question of, well, are they going to prefer animal baiting, or are they going to prefer plays? And as always, you go to your market, don't you? So it doesn't seem an impossibility that the people that operate this thing might go, people prefer animal baiting here. I mean,
well, that was the question we raised earlier, and one that I would raise again now, and I assume this will be something that you'll be looking at in the future. We know of one play performed there, The Story of Samson.
Yeah.
Why don't we hear anything more about the Red Lion?
Better question. When do people start writing down plays?
It's a good question.
1590s, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So do you think playing maybe has come to an end? Well, but why are they writing down the first play? And like, what? Because you're saying people are writing it down in the 1990s.
Those documents are a frozen period in time, aren't they? Those are lawsuits.
Exactly, yeah.
We don't actually know the name of the Red Lion Playhouse. We're calling it the Red Lion Playhouse, but the documents clearly referred to the playhouse in the fields on the site of the
Red Lion.
The house, the messuage, which is a manorial term for the centre of the manorial settlement, actually, interestingly. We don't... Yeah, these are things we need to know. Now, having discussed a bit of it with the Before Shakespeare guys, a lot of the idea is the naming culture is you name it for the region it's at. So, you wouldn't necessarily... I mean, though obviously the theatre is called the theatre, and that's a particular naming event, and that's what kind of gives that its kind of credence, is that was what its name was. Mm-hmm. What if the Red Lion has a name? We just haven't discovered what the name is yet, and we might find there's mysterious theatre here, which has got a whole list of plays that performed in it. Just no one knew what it was. I mean, I don't know, But these are the questions I want to be asking. And as you say, these are things to look at is, well, why isn't it referred to? But is it just because it's it's not a venue for a set group of players? It's like it's for traveling groups, isn't it? Is the idea. So at which point you'd have to know exactly what their repertoire was of all the players who are coming through. And much people are like, these guys do like these 10 plays and that's all they do. And they'll come in and do the performance and bugger off again. We just don't know, do we? And that's why I think it's interesting, because obviously with the theatre and like these sort of places, you've got a set group that perform here and they have that repertoire, and so you know what plays they're putting on. But if it's a group of itinerant players who no one really knows who they are, or just coming through, you might get a mention where it isn't like a legal document. It's like, oh, this thing is ready because these guys want to perform here.
But this is actually something that I'm sorry, this is an area that I'm very interested in, because the analogy I give, if you were to record now in London, the purpose-built comedy venues of London, right?
Yeah.
Just as an example, you would end up with a map that looked like it's got two or three of them around central London.
It's got the Camden, isn't it? And that's about it.
Yeah, the ones that are specifically built for, I think there's the backyard in North London, and there's the Hideaway in South London. You'd end up with a map that looked a lot like someone mapping out the Elizabethan playhouses. So my thing is that those ones that we know of all represent the apex venues. Yeah, those are the ones that these actors are all in these professional troupes. Yeah, much like archaeologists, you don't come from nowhere, right? You got to go and earn your chops somewhere. With this regional rep, smaller venues, temporary stages and things like that. And that's always been something that's been missing from the discussion of these sites. There seems to be this weird assumption or talk about that they sort of, they exist in their own rights. The people who perform in them suddenly all knew how to write and act, and that's the end of it. Do you think you may have found one of those sites that fills a gap between a juggler on the side street and someone performing at the Globe?
That's a really interesting way of putting it, because I honestly hadn't really thought about that. That's a really good question, Paul. I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, I don't know how we prove it. That's the only thing, because obviously the problem with archaeology is we infer stuff through material culture, don't we? So when there's an absence of material culture and physical remains, where do you start bridging those gaps between what we know and what we think? Yeah, I like that.
Well, try and work out how it operates, who the audience are, and then maybe you'll start identifying those itinerant players. But maybe it's something to keep in mind while you're looking at it, at least.
So I think there's the great stuff. The great thing about actually what we've been doing with this is so one of the things we've been very keen on is we've been quite active on social media talking about stuff. We've done the press release, all these sorts of things. But part of that has been because we've wanted to initiate dialogues kind of like this, is discussions about, well, what we have some ideas of the questions to ask, but I'm not pretending to be an expert in Elizabethan theatre by any stretch of the imagination. I was just the silly bugger who's lucky enough to run a site where we found one. So the whole point is being out there and inviting questions, because we kind of want to be transparent with this. Look, this is really interesting. Yeah, there's lots of experts who know more than we do. So, what sort of questions would you like us to answer? Give us some. It's a very sort of collegiate kind of we had some great communication with people from Australia and Canada and all these sorts of things. And it's what questions do you think are good ones to answer? Because we know a certain amount, but our speciality is limited. So
that's very, very modest of you.
One tries.
One tries. I can hold it together for 10 minutes at a time.
Maybe five.
And then I'm back to I am amazing.
Well, yeah, you said it, not me. Moving on.
Yeah. Actually, then we'll come up to the final parts of it because obviously, really interesting excavation. But what's next in the life of this site and your work on it?
So up next is something I've been hinting at throughout this, which is publication. Publication, outreach, etc., etc. We've been quite lucky. I've already done like one article introducing the site in London Archaeologist. I've got another article we're in the process of putting together, which is like a question and answer sort of thing about the site, about what we've had, things like that. Some of the stuff that you've been asking, actually, I think I've got a bit more detail in there, so it'll be worth checking that out when that comes out in October, I think. But also, we're going to launch into our full publication process at the end of this year, start of next year, and it's a 24-month program where we reinterrogate all the data and we start pulling it apart, doing our land use to try and answer some of these questions in terms of where's the entrance, how do we get under the stage, all this sort of stuff, as well as what's the actual like phasing between farmhouse to inn, how does that relate to this, can we actually get a better idea of how these things work, and start looking at the material culture and going, where's this come from? Why is there a random trade token? What we got? We had one of the Mary Rose trade tokens as well.
Ooh!
One of the ones that the Jettons that was found on the Mary Rose. We had one of them. Like, what? Huh?
Yeah, that's fascinating,
isn't it? It's amazing. And we had all these we had some amazing clay tobacco pipes and all these really cool. Like we had one of the ones where it was like the soldier dude with his hat, like the big sort of beefeater style hat kind of thing, and he had really awesome stuff, and so
where's this material going to end up?
Belongs in a museum. Sorry, couldn't help it. At the moment, well, we need to finish processing it all. Well, we've processed it. We need to publication it, obviously.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's held in our offices. It will, of course, at some point, I imagine, end up in the Museum of London. One of the things we would like to do is, I'm quite a big fan of local pop-up exhibitions and stuff. I know there's the Idea Store on Whitechapel High Street, and I'm very, very keen to do some sort of like pop-up exhibition with some of the finds that we can actually give people to handle, as opposed to like what could be. We had about half a dozen intact Bellarmine vessels as well. Which is really cool.
Yeah, I saw some pictures of that. Really nice.
Well,
if you need any contacts for local community groups in that area,
I know you're on my first port of call. Don't you worry.
What have you got in the way of sort of outreach and engagement planned?
That is one of those things that's to be seen, because I mean, part of it is doing stuff like we've actually launched our own podcast today, and we've been up in the flagship person talking about the Red Lion on that, which is quite cool. We're doing all the social media stuff, but in terms of actual outreach, what I'd like to do is to go to local schools if possible, if they'll have me. Talk about sort of stuff we've got, because I'm very keen to sort of go, this is everyone's culture, this is everyone's story.
Yeah.
This is, you live in this area, this is part of your tale.
Was there any outreach during the excavation?
Not really, but that's more to do with stuff about confidentiality. As you know, with like clients and stuff, some stuff you can't necessarily talk about because of because rightly it's their site. They don't want people turning up in perhaps it's not a safe environment for people to be in because demolition site as well. Blah blah blah. We did do we had the local council round and that sort of stuff. We had the planning committee came around. I did an evening tour around for them and stuff. I wanted to do more outreach, and it was discussed with Glasson, but it didn't happen, unfortunately. But I mean, to be honest, at the time, we still didn't know necessarily what we had. All I could have done was look, there's lovely features here. There's a bit of masonry. There's an intact brew house over there.
Yeah.
What can you say? But it's afterwards we get to tell the story, and that's kind of the problem with archaeology, isn't it? It's like you have to do the post-ex to work out what the bloody hell it was you had in some cases.
In some cases, for certain
cases.
But people do like to walk around sites.
I know they do. It's quite good fun, but I think, to be honest, because that site was an active demolition site as well all the way through up until the last 4 or 5 months when the piling crews came in. It was, and we still had some of the demolition activity was still occurring while the piling was, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, was a lot of fun. And there's the archaeologists. So because of those sorts of things, I think also there was an insurance issue as well. So
I have one last question about the site.
Go on.
You said that you're able to write in your report this is a international significance. What impact is that having on the potential of the client building on that site?
Not a huge amount, as they've already started building. I mean, I think it's good for them in terms of they can say this was here, and it gives them free press. So from that point of view, for them, it's only beneficial, I think. But that's the long view you have to have. Like on site, it might not necessarily have that long view. There might be more concerns about budgets and things like that. So they now can go, this is quite beneficial to them.
Was there no, I mean, this may be above your pay grade again, but was there any discussion you were aware of scheduling the site?
No, but I can answer that one quite happily because the timbers, while we had them, were very degraded. I mean, so part of the issue with this was we think there was quite a high water table at some point, but the entire site in the 1960s had large concrete pads cut through it for the construction of the warehouse. It punctured down to the sand, and the water, it drained away.
And that's damaged it beyond repair.
So the timbers we had, while we had them, I mean, we only had the later ones in the reuse areas were the only ones we could actually get dendro samples out of, because the rest of them, we tried to take them, we did take them, but they were basically mush. We spent an awful lot of time over January, February, March of 2019 trying to preserve them. So we'd spray them down, cover them in like plastic, all that sort of stuff to try and protect the timbers. But they weren't in any way protected. There was no way. It wasn't like you could do like with the globe and have the rose, and have them under the. It just no way.
No. The level of preservation wasn't there to do that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, very best of luck with the publication. You've got a 2 years stretching out in front of you.
Yeah, I've got about 150 days of work over those 2 years to get, and that's for there's going to be 2 publications. There's going to be like an article for Landmass on so we're sort of hiving it out a little bit. Prehistoric Roman stuff's going in an article, and the medieval and post-med stuff, monograph, which would be quite cool. They've written a monograph.
Very cool.
That'll be an experience.
This is your first monograph. Oh, best of luck.
Thank you.
That's going to be nice.
I was featured in Convoy's Wharf, but only as acknowledgements. Don't get me started on that.
Next time we do an interview, we'll talk about all of your. We'll do like a Ask an Archaeologist After Dark. Get you drunk and just talk about all of your beefs.
Oh yeah, it'll be good fun. As long as my arm.
So I have 2 more questions before I can let you go. First question is sight cat or sight dog?
Ooh. I have to say cats. I've got 3 of them. I've got one of them asleep over there at the moment. So sight cat.
Yeah.
Because you haven't got to worry about walking them, and they're sensible enough to get out of the way if you need to.
And then the last question. You work in the heritage industry, but how would you like to be remembered?
As someone who, I don't know, as someone who wasn't an asshole, I think would be a start. So I've got to bleep that one out as well, haven't you? Let me go again.
No, that's good enough. I think everyone will get that. You've held it together for an hour and a half, so thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to plug before we say goodbye?
No, that's it. Just thank you for having me, dude. Always a long time listener, and obviously contributor in terms of music. But it's nice to have a chance to have a chat with you.
Lovely talking to you. Keep safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Ask an Archaeologist podcast with me, Paul Duncan McGarity. The music you were listening to was by From the Ashes. Check them out on Bandcamp. It was produced by me, Paul Duncan McGarity. Follow me on Twitter at askanar, or send an email at askanar@gmail.com. But most importantly, if you've enjoyed yourself and you think you have a friend who might be interested in the podcast, please tell them about it. Write a review, put up a star rating, let people know that we're here. It's incredibly helpful, much appreciated. Once again, thank you to everyone. Bye-bye.